Welcome to the UST Education recorded webinar series. This session is powered by US Transactions. UST is a boutique payment processing firm providing you with personalized service. We offer agnostic, best fit technology solutions for associations, nonprofits, and enterprise clients.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. All right. I am going to grab my PowerPoint, hopefully. All right. Oh, good. I'll pull my chat up too. You know, all the things when you're presenting, you gotta have all the things listed. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I am super excited to be here talking about association leadership. We're talking about the 3 zones of association leadership. Now, I'm going to tell you, I can't promise you that these are the only zones, but I think they're the 3 most important zones that I've experienced in my time in association work. So I think they're the most important. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm looking at to see what types of things are coming in on the chat. All right. Very good. Risk management. I love it. Thank you. We're going to be talking about that. All right, a little bit about me. So I've been around association work now for 26 years. I've worked in all different types of associations, travel, basketball, trees, veterinary medicine, and now in grants. I am currently the chair of the ASAE Small Staff Advisory Committee. So if you're a small staff, you may have seen me in some of those programs. And then I have been here at NGMA actually coming up on my 5th year. And we have had certainly an interesting year in grants, but the last 5 years have seen our association grow from about 2,900 to 7,500 members and beyond. Our annual meeting has more than doubled. We've got accreditation for our credential, and I see one of our staff members, Elizabeth, is on the call, and that is due to her amazing work. And then our budget has pretty dramatically increased as well. So we've had this incredible period of growth that I've navigated through, and certainly how I've approached leadership has changed as we've grown as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But overall, I'm an association nerd. It's what I do. It's what I love, and I like talking about it. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to have some real talk about being an association leader. And I hope when you leave, you have maybe a new lens to look at when you view the work of leadership and association. So depending on where you are, if you're thinking about, hey, one day I want to be an ED, this maybe gives you some insight into what keeps me up at 3 a.m. in the morning about our association and what that day to day is really like. I certainly had no understanding before I sat in the seat of leadership. I thought I knew, but I probably didn't have a great perspective on it. But even as a leader, like I said, as we've changed and encountered certain challenges, it's great to hear how other people look at leadership and what maybe I'm doing well, maybe places I could do some things differently. And then I could not leave today without talking a little bit about what this might look like different in a small staff environment versus a large staff environment, because it definitely matters. And these zones scale a little bit differently depending on where you are. All right, the 3 zones. Here they are. All right, strategy, risk management, and culture. And guess what? You as the leader are at the center of these things. It doesn't mean we don't have players in all of them, but really the reason that we're in leadership is that you are the place that these things kind of intersect. And it's important to know that and to realize that. All right, why these zones? Before we dive too deeply, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I think these are the zones of leadership. And I want to get into that place of thinking a little bit higher about leadership. And I start with, what do I think is really going to matter on the day that I leave this job? And what did I do that really affected change? And it starts, I think, at the beginning with, how do we protect the association? We talk very frankly about the idea that it's everyone's goal on the board and the staff that we need to make sure the association continues beyond us. That's the bare minimum. And the reality is that there are associations that are closing their doors all the time. So we have to do the work of being attentive to how we at the base level now navigate those challenges that are right in front of us, the internal and the external ones, and how we make sure that there is a next day, how we get to continue to do our work. And so I think that's the starting place for everything. Second, how has my time in the leadership seat moved us forward towards the mission? And I know that's easier said than done, but that's what we do as nonprofits. If we haven't gotten closer to the vision of success for our organization, we've just kind of existed in neutral and we never put the organization in drive. And then finally, it'd be nice if we could do all these things alone, but that's just simply not the case. Leadership means creating environments for success for all the people on the team with us, from the board to the staff to the volunteers to our partners, and of course, to our members. And so we're going to talk a lot more about this in just a few minutes. But these are the three places I thought, if I really want to look at what leadership means at the back end, these are the things I think about. All right, so we're going to start with risk management. And I apologize right off the bat. Like I said, this is not a sexy topic, but we need to talk about it because it perhaps is the most critical part. And it's just like I tell my 14-year-old, my first job as a parent is to keep you alive. And my first job as a leader is to keep our business functioning. I am constantly scanning our business, looking for the worst case scenarios. Hopefully, I'm doing that so that my staff doesn't have to do that and they can just work without some of that worry. Does that make me a Debbie Downer? Yeah, probably. It probably does. And I'm honest about that. But it's my job to say that scary stuff out loud so that we can be better prepared, so that we are all working to build protections and ensure that there is no single person or no single event that can take the organization down. So what are we talking about when we talk about risk? So I like buckets, keeping it simple. Financial, legal, environmental, and reputational. And I really just like this little picture of a dog, to be honest. Let's talk about legal risk. And this is what I think most people think about when they think about risk. Just a few considerations that maybe are not high on your radar. Things like data leaks are really front and center these days, and we collect a lot of data on our members. Things like injury at your annual meeting. I think that's a really typical part of our crisis communications plans. IP theft or misuse, certainly a bigger spotlight on that right now with AI. And selection of awards, scholarships, your elections, those have been under scrutiny this year in a way that they have not previously been. And I think very much that nonprofits need to be spending some time going through those processes and maybe spending time with their attorney to make sure that they have fair and good and legally that if something happened in a court of law, we had everything we need and we were moving through those processes in a way that protects the association. I think it's also important that we talk to our staff about these issues. A lot of this comes down to the work that they do. They need to understand the consequences and that part of their jobs is to plan to execute in a way that minimizes our risk. With AI, there's a ton of ways to meet and create crisis plans and have AI drafted. You can do that on a phone call, take minutes, have it write up a draft of this is the crisis plan we discussed, take it and tweak it, and you got it in the file. We can talk about the ways that we store our IP. And we just had an issue where we found a copy of our signature book on the internet from a long time ago. Let's talk about ways that we prevent that from happening on our watch. We can talk about how we create those better policies and we do policy review. We train our managers to prevent HR issues. But you have to make this a priority. financial risk, for me, at the center of our business is huge. We're talking about making sure that our monies, which is our members' monies, are managed fairly and with according to our policies, according to the law, and that we have financial strategies that are going to carry us into the future, again, concerning whether we continue to exist or not. So things like diversification of funding. Man, if you have grants, that diversification of funding is what we're talking about. Because a lot of nonprofits woke up last year and went, wow, we have 60 and 80% of our entire budget wrapped up in federal grants. And that's not a great idea, or wrapped up in one single grant. So we really have to have those discussions about where our financial risk is and where we can maybe do things a little bit differently. Obviously, having adequate reserves, we can talk about that all day long. We know COVID was a little bit of a wake-up call. Many of us did not have the reserves we needed to navigate 6 months, a year, 2 years of major disruption in our business. So again, that's part of our financial risk strategy. And let me just say, fraud and theft are the number one reason that small businesses fail. We don't talk about it enough. It's not any different for nonprofits. And I have a lot of friends who've moved into the leadership seat in the last 5 to 7 years, and many of them uncovered fraud at their organizations. It is far more common than we like to talk about. And so that's why I like to highlight financial risk and all the ways that us in the seat of leadership are making those policies, making execution on our financial management, front and center in our world. Nobody, again, wants to go to their board and say, hey, we've been having fraud at our organization. We have theft happening within our staff. We want to be on top of this. And I find that reputational risk is the one we don't spend enough time on, especially in small staffs. But when they hit, they can take the wind out of our sails. Our momentum kind of can stop. In today's media environment, one scandal involving a board member, one viral social media post, one rumor that cannot be easily disproven is a recipe for disaster. So how are we working on preventing these? How are we prepared to respond? And I think one of the harder questions is the thing we don't talk about is who responds? How do we make the decisions about where we respond? These are big ones. And when you have a member who is on the front page of a newspaper or in social media, and you get the phone call from a member or from the media, you got to think about how you're going to deal with that, because your association can easily be connected to it. And it is a real thing that is happening with several of my friends in associations right now, particularly in the current kind of political environment and kind of wild west of the media right now. And then environmental risk. So for those who had pandemics on their risk list prior to 2020, you should have played the lottery. There are environmental risks that we can predict and ones that frankly we can't. But at the time of COVID, I was a component relations leader for a very large organization with 69 chapters. And I got a front row seat to see how organizations navigated through that. The leaders who were excellent at scanning the environment, whose board and staff were great at communicating and responding to disruption, did better. And the ones that didn't, man, they're still digging their way out. So what I say is environmental risk, and we'll talk a little bit too when we talk about strategy, because it's part of that too, is really, really critical. Again, we have major political shifts happen. We are having unprecedented competition in the for-profit world. Technology, the ability for people to access high quality information and education outside of associations is huge. Mergers are a giant thing in our world as well. they're all affecting our business more and probably faster than ever before. Not probably, definitely faster than ever before. But are we talking about it? Are we looking at it as risk management? And if we're not, why not? All right. Just a few of the top risks for associations are on the left, and some of the ways we might mitigate those things are on the right. So HR is at the top of that list. Absolutely the most important thing you can do as you develop your staff. Once you have one staff, you really need some HR policies, but the bigger you are, the more policies you need, really. And it's getting more complicated. As a remote staff who have staff in multiple states, it gets uber complicated. So I need lots of expertise because that is not my strength. Um, Financial fraud and theft, again, having great policies, having reviews and audits if you can. Component chapters. By the way, this is an enormous area of risk, and most boards don't even understand it. Components and chapters are places where if they are part of your organization, every meeting they have, every content they provide can be liability for you. If they are not, and they are, say, more of a federated model, but they're using your name and are associated with you, they're making decisions often you don't even know about. And when they make bad ones, which sometimes they do because they're humans, it's going to come back on the organization. I saw that during COVID with some of my chapters and some of their not great decision making. And it's something we need to talk about mitigating. That's why we have great policies or MOUs. We're doing great onboarding and execution and consistent leadership with our chapters. It's absolutely vital. And then I can't not talk about the lack of succession planning for EDs. It is so common. So many associations don't have a plan for what happens if their association or their key staff were to leave. And I have watched as several of my friends have either left or had medical issues and had to step away, and their association had no plan for it. And it really puts a stop to the work of the organization when they're scrambling to figure out how to lead through the day-to-day work instead of moving forward. So that's why, yes, SOPs, not the most fun part of our job, but an absolute critical one. Can we keep the wheels on the bus should any one single person have to step away for a period or permanently? I cannot say enough about cybersecurity. I feel like I have done a lot of talking about cybersecurity in the last couple of years. We live in a digital world, man, and many of us have remote or hybrid staffs. You really have to have good insurance. You need to have good training and testing with your staffs. You need to create that as a culture of we have to protect ourselves because there are just too many risks right now and too many folks who like our data, who like any financial information that we have, having good password management, all of that. I worked in an organization not that long ago who had a ransomware attack and it shut our entire business down for 30 days. No conference registrations could be sold, no books could be sold. We couldn't even answer the phone for a period because it was all connected. So that there was no money coming in. These are real risks. And for a small org with a limited reserve, it can be a giant setback. So I say to you that the planning that you do for cybersecurity, you will be so thankful if anything ever happens. And more than likely it will happen. It is coming, particularly with AI. So you want to do that protection as much as you can. And then coming back to that idea of lack of foresight. So this is one of our risks. No one wants to be the Blockbuster or the BlackBerry of the nonprofit world. Staying relevant is important. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we talk about strategy. All right. So we need a few engagement questions today so that you can get your credit in. I wanted to start off with something pretty easy. So if you will please add to the chat what you believe to be your most pressing risk at your association. Mhm. I'm seeing cybersecurity, ooh, all of them. Uh-oh. IP, yeah, absolutely. Technology. It's all across the board. All right. Lots of those. I'm loving it. I mean, I'm not loving it. That means you've got some places you got to do some work, but hopefully you are thinking about it now and going, oh, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make some policies or do some planning on our staff. Succession planning for sure. All right. Awesome. We'll keep it moving. So, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about small versus large. I don't want to talk a lot about it, but it changes. Risk changes when we grow and our businesses get more complex. And it means that we may grow in some of our efficiencies and our processes, but we actually tend to grow in more layers of education and oversight. And so more money means more risk, more security by having more money. It also means more scrutiny, more long-term projections, more complexity in the way we plan. So you can see here that small orgs, if you're under 1 million, you're probably not doing a review or an audit. You might be, but you're probably the exception. You're probably relying a lot on internal oversight, which, at some point is really hard to maintain with volunteers. Larger orgs tend to have more policies, more training, more review by internal and outside partners. I think more importantly, they're probably looking a little bit longer down the road. So instead of doing a basic budget and saying, did we meet revenue goals? Did we meet expense goals? They're doing 3-year programmatic budgets that are aligned with the strategic plan. They're talking about revenue diversification and cash flow and how we're going to evolve our budgets. And so it just gets more complex. It's the same work done a little bit differently, but it is more work, in my opinion, at a large org to do things like financial management. All right. Here are some of the most important things that I think we need to consider about managing risk. And I think insurance is just everyone's first thought, and I think it's important, and that's why I put it at number one. I do find that a lot of folks are either are underinsured, and either that's because they didn't talk to an insurance broker and attorney that works in nonprofits. I see that a lot, or they haven't scaled up their insurance as their business has grown. So both of those things are critical when we talk about insurance, that your needs are changing, your insurance needs are changing, and are you talking to the right people to help you get high quality insurance for the work that you do? Policies, policies, and policies. I can't say it enough. It is not the most fun part of our jobs. I got to be honest, I'm in the middle of doing a bunch of policy reviews right now, but when you need them, you need them. And in my 26 years, I've been sued 3 times. I've worked through ethics violations, board members going rogue, members who have threatened or assaulted staff members, volunteers who have gotten into fights in the middle of conference. When you don't have good policies about the conduct of your members, your staff, your volunteers, those moments can consume so much time and energy, and they become giant boulders in the road to our progress instead of being pebbles. And we made the choice to make them boulders when we didn't invest the time to do good policy management. I promise you again, it will pay off down the road if you think about what could happen. Let's write a policy. Let's talk to an attorney and make sure it's legal. And then we know we have a game plan for if this happens down the road. One of the most overlooked areas, I think, especially for small staff, is training and onboarding. We need everyone to understand the guardrails and the expectations. And there's a ton of easy ways to do it. I really did just recently I did a set of onboarding videos for our board. I did them in PowerPoint. They're not perfect, but they do give us a chance to highlight those critical policies and procedures in the way we approach the work of the board to these new members, so that they understand things like legal duties and financial risk. So we do that time on board. We onboard our chapters too. We do a lot of emails. We do a meeting onboarding. a recording they can watch. We try to make sure that every single chapter leader has gone through that training so that they understand what they're being asked to do and what some of the limits and what they can do is there. Right? Again, it's time well spent, because when you have someone who violates the policy, you have the evidence to say, we've told you. And if we ever go to court, we told them not to do X, Y, and Z. So we want to have that good onboarding experience. And I think people generally want to know what you can and can't do. Again, we talked about succession plans and SOPs. When I first started in associations, everybody had a lovely physical binder that sat on their desk that outlined all their processes. And when you leave, you pass your binder physically to somebody new. Now we have so many more tools. We can get on a call and we can talk through it, or we can video how we do processes and leave that in a file. But it's really important that everybody on our staff think about what happens if I can't come to work tomorrow. And could the organization survive if I couldn't be here? That's just part of what all of us should be doing. I talk to a lot of orgs that have no plans. And when you have an ED where all the files live on their laptop and no one knows the password, it's a problem. Or no one knows how to do payroll or pay bills. If the ED is gone, it's a problem. And you got to talk about it. And then the last thing is we have these consistent conversations about risk. They're often hard conversations, and usually at a staff retreat or our board meetings, and we can't always talk about like how much money did we bring in for the conference, or are our membership numbers steady or rising. It really has to be first, how are we protecting the association from the most likely risks that we can identify? And most of them are easy to plan around, but we just simply don't. So why is this zone 1? Nobody wants to be the person that signs the papers that ends the association. No one wants to make the error that means that we have to tell staff that they don't have jobs tomorrow. No one wants no one wants the association's end to happen on their watch. It's a very real thing. So just like I say, we got to eat our veggies and exercise to maintain our health, we have to do the consistent work of risk mitigation and planning so that we can do the fun work of building into our future, which is what we get to talk about next. See how I did that? We're going to talk about strategy, because that's zone 2. This is about the responsibility we have to be relevant. And this is way more fun, I think. All right. So what is strategy? For a nonprofit, it's everything. It's where are we going? How do we get there? And I think the one that most of us overlook that speaks to the heart of relevance is, why should anyone care? We do a lot of really lovely things as nonprofit associations, but the reality is that our businesses confront changes to what our customers need and want. We face competition, we've talked a little bit about, by other associations, for-profits, technology. But do we ask the question, why do people need us? Our partners and sponsors can now penetrate their markets a million different ways, right? We have so much technology, so much capacity to market and promote through technology. Why should they sponsor with you? What is so valuable and unique that our members will open their checkbook, even during times of economic stress, to access what you offer? That's really what relevance is about. All right. So a little bit harder question for number 2. I want you to take just a second and think about and throw in the chat the answer to, how do you describe in 10 words or less, and I wanted to make it a little hard for you, exactly what success looks like for your organization. And I'll use my organization as an example. So I would say every member competent to manage any grant and no audit findings. It's harder than it looks, but it's really important. And I'll take more than 10 words if you want, but what I'm wanting you to do is really distill down what you think it means for the organization to fulfill its mission and to almost bring it to life in just as few words. I should have made you do a haiku or something. That would have been fun. Oh, I love some of these. All right. An improved healthcare system that focuses on wellness. Every member has a say in research environment. All right. Protect pediatric medicine in Ohio. I love it. I find this is a really hard thing for a board to do. It's super hard. They get so caught up in sort of the experience of membership, they lose sight of the bigger picture. So I love doing this activity with boards. Oh, keep them coming. I love this. All right, definitely want to save this chat afterwards because I want to see all the good things that you are doing in your environments. All right, we'll keep it going. All right, we can talk about strategy. We can't talk about strategy without talking about the creation of strategy. I can't ignore it, but it's also not primarily in the hands of the chief staff officer. So I want to touch on it briefly and talk about some of those things that we already know about. Things like mission creep, where a board or a single board leader pushes the organization beyond its scope, which is, again, against their fiduciary duties. But it really goes back to that question. Do we have clarity from the board about why we exist and why we are relevant? And no doubt, it is challenging to get a board to even understand how to think about strategy and build high impact goals, which goes to my third bullet. And I have to thank Sharon Kneebone, if you know Sharon, for saying this phrase to me a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. Our boards sometimes see activity more important than impact. And that's something we have to monitor. Doing lots of things is not the same thing as doing few things with big impact. So I wish I could like tattoo that on every board member. Doing lots of things is not the same thing as having impact. And I think also prioritizing our resources so that our strategic plans really give us an opportunity to dive in. And one of the things it should do is give us a chance to edit out what doesn't work so that we can spend our members' dollars on programs that create incredibly high value and high impact instead of just a collection of things we do. And so as an ED, you have to confront a lot of that a lot of the time. All right, let's go back and talk about some of the things we can control. And I think what's really critical is that we view our strategic plans as organizational wide sprints, which means we need to have a plan for how to get there. I like to view my work like a coach, because I came from the sports side. I grew up doing sports. Did I make sure I put the right players on the field for each position? Did I make sure that my team had the equipment and the facilities they needed to get prepared? Did they understand that who our competition was and have the right approach to each game? What did we do to develop a fan base and encourage them to support us through the process? And then who's accountable for success on the defense, on the offense, making sure that the reservations for the bus to get us to games is made. You know, if I'm the coach, I'm responsible for ensuring that all the pieces are in place, that everyone understands the goal and that everyone is moving towards those goals, not some of the time, but all of the time. So here's where I'm talking about accountability, having that centric leadership that understands that my job is to keep pushing us forward and that we have a plan to execute on those goals, which leads us into strategic alignment. So as you come into your strategic plan, leaders need to be thinking about how do we put all the pieces in place? Do we have the staff that we need to do the work? Do we need to go and contract for short-term expertise? You know, what programs are needing some evaluation and maybe some editing out so that those resources can be better spent. I think two big areas that get missed. One is we're not taking a good look at our volunteer structures. We have a really bad issue in associations where we like to create these very static committees, and that's not nearly as effective as more agile systems. And so I'm very fortunate. My board has allowed me to shape our volunteer structure according to the needs of each of our plan in order to get our work done. We don't have a lot of standing committees. We actually only have one standing committee anymore. And the rest we do kind of task forces that allow us to move through projects with subject matter expertise and staff administrative expertise together. Um, and so I also like to point out that there's not a whole lot of accountability for volunteers, and that's really hard for small staffs who have committees that are doing operational work or programmatic work. So we really need to consider how we use our committees in the best possible way so that we can be agile, we can have accountability, and we can just be more aligned generally with what we want to achieve. And then technology. It is such a big part of our business, our AMSs, our LMSs, all the other S's. This change of a strategic plan is a really wonderful time to do an audit of where technology can help us achieve our goals, or where we can find some efficiencies, so that we have the time to do the programmatic work. AI is changing our world, guys. It is blowing things up. And this piece is probably more important than ever before. Also, when thinking about timing, I always like to point out that big changes need to be planned. I see that so often. Someone comes in and they're like, we're going to change the AMS system in the middle of a massive project that is important to the strategic plan. Like, we need to plan when we make those big changes to tech so that we're not carrying both the strategic work alongside, and getting weighed down by also major tech changes. So it really helps to again, make a plan for execution and include technology in that. All right. I just wanted to throw this out again, small versus large staff. As someone who had 6 members of their staff, I can tell you, the hard thing is that all the work falls on the ED. The ED is usually doing all of it. They are reviewing the tech subscriptions. They are looking at job descriptions. They are hiring. They are firing. They are, doing procurement and getting bids for contractors and doing those contracts. They are tracking measurables and reporting to the board on the strategic plan. They are doing the budget. It's a lot. Next time you see a small staff leader, just give them a hug or something, because it is a lot to try to navigate all these things by yourself. The other side is, in some ways, it's easier. Yes, in a larger staff, you are directing your chief technology officer to review tech. You're talking to your COO about what kind of staffing changes you think you might need. Maybe you have someone who builds a dashboard for you to do all your tracking. Your CFO is creating your multi-year budget. But coordinating all of that, getting buy-in, getting information up from the staff so that you're making good decisions, is really hard. It's really, really hard. So small staffers typically those EDs have a finger on the pulse of what needs to change and maybe really close to that decision-making process. As an ED, you've got a lot of data collection to get and a lot of getting out to your management to make sure they're getting what they need and making sure everyone at the bottom too is getting heard as well. And that takes time. It takes a lot of time. It's turning a big ship. But alignment is really the work of the job. And it can look really different given your size and your culture and who your team, your volunteers. It can look really different. All right, so let's review a little bit about leadership and strategy. As the place where strategy really comes to life and becomes this tangible thing, it really does rest on the ED. First, you want to get that clarity. And I'm just going to say it. If you don't have a clear view of what success looks like, nobody else will. You need to be able to tell your story. You need to be able to paint the picture. If you can't do that, you have trouble right from the start. And I see it a lot of people who are like, yes, we're a lovely community. People just want to be part of us. No. What do you need to achieve? What are you looking to really shape in the marketplace, in your members' lives, in the profession? You need to be able to really tell that story so clearly that people can feel it. And like I said, you need to understand that power. There's a tremendous power in being able to communicate about it. People are moved by emotion. You cannot get people to follow you or your organization using a few bullet points on the web page. You, your staff, your board, your volunteers, your ambassadors, your partners need to understand who you are as an organization and what they are doing to help you achieve your goals. If they don't understand it, they don't know how to engage with you. I do our onboarding with volunteers because I think it's a time when I can say, this is where we're headed. This is exactly what you're helping us to build and why that's important. And then at the end of the cycle, we also we measure it. Did you understand the role you play in our strategic plan? Do you think that your time volunteering was meaningful and helped us move towards those goals? I think it's important that you kind of have this consistent drumbeat of connection and relevance. And this is who we are, and this is the role that you play with us. Um, Focus and intensity breeds success. This is something you have to offer as a leader. This is about two things: being a decisive editor of the business. Are you giving your team a clear understanding of where they should be spending their time versus not spending their time? If they are spending their time on administrative work on projects that aren't the next item on the plan, why? Do we have committees who are trying to ideate and create work that isn't aligned with us? Does our team understand the direction we're going, and are we working towards that every day, every week, every month? That is your job as a leader. And finally, we need to do what we can to nurture effort and excitement. And I find this is something that a lot of people don't do. No one wants to follow a coach who's negative and blames others. My job is to coach them into a place of alignment, to help them understand, and for my board to understand that my work is to edit our business, to be focused, to be the most impactful, to do the most meaningful stuff. No one wants to do work just to do work. We all want to feel that what we did meant something to our members, to our partners, to our volunteers. We want to feel like it matters. And how am I setting that up as a leader? All right, another exercise. What is the one thing you can do differently today to create some strategic momentum? Go ahead and throw it in the chat. Got to get that credit. But I think it offers you a chance to also reflect on who you are as a leader and some of the things ways you're communicating that maybe can help your staff and your volunteers, especially, know exactly, how you're going to position yourself to move the business forward, to move them forward as people. Lots of volunteer onboarding. And I think it's so critical. I think it's one of those things I sort of started because we were so small in the beginning. When you have a very small staff, I was like, I'll be on there, I'll do all the onboarding. And it's sort of become like it was so effective to just have me connected to helping everyone understand what we were doing that it's become now, I think, an important part of what I do. All right. So now we get to talk about the third zone, which means we're getting closer to the end. This one is a short one, but an absolutely important one. I almost feel like I don't need to talk about culture because it's an integral part of the other two zones that we've mentioned, but I also think that we need to talk about it. Because it's, again, something I see a lot of executives not give enough attention to, other than paying homage to the genius of Boy George and Culture Club. We want to talk about how the only person who can really do this work is the chief staff officer. Like I said, I see that culture building is not a priority at a lot of organizations, but it really is the thing that, to go back to what I was previously saying, makes people feel connected to the work of the organization and to each other. So recently, I had a group of association folk I was talking to, and I asked them, what do you wish that your ED did differently? And I expected them to say, you know, I wish that we got Fridays off in June, or I wish we had better snacks in the staff room. But almost universally, they said, I wish that they heard me. I wish they took advantage of my experience. I wish they didn't think they knew all the answers. There was no talk about bowling at the staff retreat or even bonuses. They wanted to be seen and for their talents to be used. So I say that with culture matters. And if you want to get the very best out of people, you need to see that you as a leader are leading with them, not despite them, not through them. You are leading next to them. In all the work that we do in running conferences and webinars and working in governance, we spend very little time thinking about ourselves at the intersection of those cultures, our board, our staff, and our membership. How we align that is really important. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I would say this, one of the hardest part of our jobs is that everything we do is collaborative. That's part of nonprofit governance. That's part of running a staff. There's nothing that we do that happens in a vacuum. So everything we are doing is in a collaborative environment. And you have to know that from the onset. And so those are the skills that you have to hone as a leader, is how do I navigate all of that collaboration all the time? And it's an important part of the job. All right. Just some things to consider about culture building. How do we define our culture? What are our values? Do people understand our culture and what they're signing up for in terms of being part of our staff or our volunteer structures? Do we talk about it in a clear way? Are we upfront and consistent in how we actually execute on that? Cultural alignment is something that really doesn't get discussed a lot, but it should. Although our boards and our volunteers and our members, they're all separate things, there should be sort of this continuous through line about that culture because we are the point of intersection. Our staff may be executing, and as a former chapter relations person, I can tell you that's absolutely critical if you've got chapters, that your chapter relations person is sort of feeding your culture down into your chapter structures. It's important in our partnerships so that they understand who we are as an organization. So, I can't leave anywhere without quoting a little bit of Ted Lasso too. Accountability matters. How are we making sure, and I'm quoting Rebecca, by the way, I know it's Rebecca. How are we making sure that our execution is clear and consistent? One thing we do in our board culture assessment and our volunteer surveys is we do those every year, and we're there to measure, here's what our expectation is for culture. Did we meet the mark or not? Did we train our chairs about how they should conduct meetings based on this culture? How did we do in terms of, did we build a warm environment where everyone can come and participate in a way that they feel really valued and the work was meaningful? I think those are really important questions. So, again, trying to keep it short. Tell us 3 words to describe your organization's culture. They can be separate words, they can be a sentence, but do you have a sense, and can you kind of, in the same vein, can you clearly define what you think that culture is and should look like to the outside world or to your staff, to your board? Just throw it in the chat. Doesn't have to be perfect. Ooh, each their own. Needs improvement. All right, maybe we need to do a whole one on culture building. I know we're getting close to the end here in a second. All right, collaboration. I love collaboration, resilience, innovation, community. All right, those are good. I hope you take some of that back and you go, okay, how do we build on this? Or how do we consistently talk about this as a team? All right. So I just want to end on this idea of culture. Um, but of course, culture building isn't easy. As many of you said, needs work. I think it's never an end point. It is constantly changing. Every time you bring someone new on your team, onto your board, it's changing. And that is part of the fun of leadership, right? That's one of the challenges that we face. But I often think that my time playing sports has really helped me to understand, how teams function a little bit better and how like consistent, subtle leadership is really and can be very, very effective. But I think it starts with these 3 things. Did we make space for people to contribute their talents and expertise? Did we reinforce the notion that we need trust and that we need to come to the table believing that everyone will be a positive actor in the process of our work? Until we know better, we have to assume that they will be, and we have to show them how to be. Did we instill in our teams and our volunteers that we will be successful if we work together towards the goals? Right? Did we have, to quote Ted Lasso again, did we show them how to believe? That's part of our leadership. Now, I think as a leader, you go back and you ask yourself, what am I doing today, this week, this month? I'm creating space, trust, and belief in all the spheres of my influence in the association. All right, we're back to the end and not another picture of me. So here we go. Strategy. Where are we going? Culture building. How do we get there together? And risk management. How do we protect what we've built so that we can keep building far into the future? And those are my 3 zones. With that, thank you. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. And I'm so appreciative to UST for having me join today.